Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. It's great to see you guys after 1 week. And we'll be starting with our lecture on the life and times of Sir William Osler. As usual, please keep your mics off at all times during the lecture. And should you have any questions, please put them in the chat box so we may address them at the end of the session. So, it is impossible to study medicine and not come across the name of Sir William Osler. Famous for his pioneering work and iconic aphorisms that hold true even today, Dr. Osler is known widely as the father of modern medicine. In fact, no lecture series on the history of medicine could ever hope to be complete without learning about this great man. So, to introduce us to the life and times of Sir William Osler, we have with us today our esteemed speaker, Dr. Ravi Ramakantan, sir. Dr. Ramakantan has been a GSite from the time he joined in MBBS in 1971 way until he retired as a professor and head of the Department of Radiology in 2010. Among his many achievements, he is also the founding president of the Medical Humanities Society of India. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation to speak here today. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thanks, Rahul. I'll share my screen right away.
Yes, sir.
Okay, there we go. All go, Rahul. We can see the slides.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. This is my question to begin this talk. How do these things happen to me that I get caught in the whirlpool of history of medicine lectures in USMC, and then I end up with LIT Lopa without any hesitation? I'll talk about Sir William Osler. She, I think, consulted with Dr. Sunil Pandya, and I got an okay from them. And so it is now that I'll talk for about 30 minutes. I'm not planned a proper lecture here. So hopefully for 30 minutes and not 1 hour, I'm going to be talking about this mustache marvel. He may have had no hair on his scalp towards the end of his life, but this mustache was his registered trademark. So William Osler. How did it happen that I told without hesitation to look for that I would talk about William Osler? Therefore, this talk is in 2 parts: my story and his story. Some of you will wonder that my story is out of place here. Not at all, because my story reflects the grand traditions of GSMC and its faculty, some teachers who inspire students beyond the limits of the normal medical curriculum. And that is what is really special about the teachers that we have had for several decades now. Dr. Sunil Pandya talked about a few of them, and I will talk about 2 or 3 of them now. The reason why I am going to be talking about Sir William Osler. So that's the first part of that lecture now. How do these things happen? Teachers are always to blame. The word blame is interesting. You can call them blame. Sometimes undergraduates will call them blame because they are asked to do things beyond the curriculum. I would like to think of they have to be applauded for what they do to the teachers, to the students, and as I said, take them beyond the closed walls of medicine. You can guess who those teachers are, at least who 2 of those teachers are, and we call them always by their initials. SKP, of course, is Sunil Pandya, and MLK. I like to call him as MLK. I'm not used to calling him as M.V.L.K., and he will admonish me for that. Ravi, it's M.V.L.K. And I would say Sir MLK. When I was in first MBBS, we used to call him Milk, M-I-L-K. Not knowing the greatness of that man anyway. So these 2 people, I think, planned and plotted. I'm not sure, but I think they planned and plotted because at one end of the second floor of the hospital building, Dr. Sunil Pandya would tell me, Ravi, have you read that book, Bedside Reading of Sir William Osler? I mean, I had heard of William Osler vaguely. I've seen some things here and there in the hospital building, college building, but I have not read those books. So I thought at the end of that talk there, have you read that book? So I usually go to that darshan that I told you about last time on the second floor of the college building. And MLK tells me, Ravi, you should read this book. And Sunil Pandya and Madhuba, as he used to call him, talk to each other a lot. And I'm not sure I'm so important enough for them to discuss me, but this happened. Let's call it a coincidence. On one hand, SKP has been very gently prodding me to read this. On the other hand, MLK says, Ravi, read this book. Two different human beings with two different ways of life, but both of them seriously committed to something beyond what we call the walls of medicine. I call it the walls of medicine. They have to be broken, and that is the sense of this talking about Sir William Osler. So those were early 90s, I think, and I said, sir, where do I get this book? Palani doesn't have this book. And then this is what MLK did. So he got up from a chair, turned around, opened the cupboard, and he said, Ravi, take this is your book. You have to read it. So I said, thank you, and took it along with me. 2 days later, I said, sir, this is really heavy reading. It will take me a month or more to finish this book. So may I keep it with me for that time? And then he said something very, very moving. He said, Ravi, you are being stupid, or some words to that effect. This book is yours for life. And so I have with me even today this book on William Osler's bedside library. I should tell a little bit about this. Apparently, Osler would have a series of books in his home, and that he would read as he falls off to sleep. And I do not have any reference for it, but this looks like that's what it's all about. And this book is an anthology of many of those books or stories in those books that Oslers used to read. So I have this wonderful gift with me from maybe 20 years or longer with me, autographed by M.V.L.Kothari. And if you don't believe that this is authentic autograph and not a copy paste of this book, I don't know why you should do that. Here it is. So typical of MLK. He doesn't underline with pencil. He doesn't care. He underlines with pen, and see what he has underlined. Death is the end of all suffering. So much about death and dying, but this is not about that. This is about the fact that without 1 minute's hesitation, he handed me this book, and I said, Ravi, this book is yours. So that is the beginning of my reading. I mean, I heard a lot about Osler. I read a little bit of him from the library, but this is serious reading about William Osler. This is part one. Part one of my story of getting involved with Osler. What is part two? This man. Not many of you will know of SDB, but those who are contemporaries with me will know of him as Dr. S.D. Bhandarkar. I think it's Sudhanshu Bhandarkar, I'm not sure. He was the father, he passed away recently, he was the father of endocrinology in Bombay, perhaps in all of India, and he was an honorary at the KM hospital in the endocrine department. He literally single-handedly not only set up the clinical parts of the department, but also the records, which are difficult to beat, except those that are in the Department of Neurosurgery. I'm mentioning about record keeping because you will see through the course of this lecture that everything is about record keeping and William Osler. So we have, I know of at least 2 departments, there may be others, who keep meticulous records of patients even today. So the Department of Neurosurgery, and if you feel like you should go to the Department of Neurosurgery and take permission from whoever the head of the department is and go through some of those old records where Dr. Sunil Pandya and his colleagues have written operation notes. That will startle you. Every detail. I remember once reading Dr. Sunil Pandya's notes on, I think, sleeping angle tumor, and that it read, I started getting cramps in my hand and I requested Dr. Nagpal to take over. This is the level of detail of recording that you have from operation notes, and these were all written by all three of them, Anil Karapurkar, R.D. Nagpal, Ranjit Nagpal, and Sunil Pandya on the evening of the surgery, whether it ends at 5 o'clock or 8 p.m. So this record keeping is something that fascinated me. And when I go through the life of William Osler, that's something that comes again and again and again. And part of the greatness of that man comes from record keeping. You'll see some images of that. So what about Dr. Bhandarkar? Now, Dr. Bhandarkar was some 20-25 years older than me. And off and on, he would come down to the department. He would not call me up. He said, no, Ravi, I'll come down. You have a good view box. We can see. So off and on, he'll come down and we'll see a lot of endocrine, X-rays, metabolic bone disease, skeletal dysplasia, topics that are my favorite, and we would discuss those cases. And soon it happened that these discussions were followed by a cup of coffee in the canteen. So we will walk over to the canteen from radiology department, have a cup of coffee or 15-20 minutes, and every single time, without exception, you would insist on paying for it. Ravi, I'm older than you. Let me pay for it. And this went on for several years, and sessions of coffee that happened over case discussion started having routine. Phone call around 11 or 12 o'clock. Ravi, coffee? Ravi, coffee. So this was like M.L.K's cups of tea in his department. And over coffee, we discussed serious stuff, patient care, about humanities in medicine, many things. Definitely not sports, definitely not politics, but everything to do with medicine, something to do with what is right and what is wrong. And one morning in 2010, I get a phone call from him. Ravi, I learned that you will be retiring at the end of this month. So I want to have a final cup of coffee with you. Let's meet in the canteen at 9 o'clock. So we meet in the canteen at 9 o'clock and we talk about my retirement, about my plans and how we retire, what he did, so on and so forth. I must clarify for the youngster that Dr. Bhandarkar retired long back of that day in November 2010, but he still used to come to the department to do a little bit of help around with difficult cases, record keeping. He was also the first editor. I mean, that's a different story of the Journal of Postgraduate Medicine of the GS Medical College. That came into being because of him and one other doctor called Dr. Satoskar. Anyway, it's a phenomenal story there. So we had a cup of coffee and I said, sir, let me pay for it. And this time he let me pay for it. But during the course of the conversations, he said something very flattering. He said, Ravi, as far as I'm concerned, you are the best conventional radiologist. He said, plain film radiologist in endocrinology is concerned, please take this as a compliment. And I said to myself, chance milaga to chodega nahi. You're wondering what that is? Chance mila to chodega nahi. I said, sir, thank you very much for the compliment, but I've been wanting to say this for a long time to you. And that is, in 1976, I appeared for my medicine practicals at the JJ hospital and you were my examiner. He looked at me like this and maybe, I don't recall, I mean, I've been examiner very often. So I said at the JJ hospital, you were my examiner and you failed me. He looked at me with a little bit of staring eyes and he said, Ravi, you mean I failed you in medicine I said, yeah. I said, abhi chance mila to chhodne ka nahi. So he said, Ravi, you mean I failed you in medicine? If I had failed you, you deserve to fail. You deserve to fail. That was it, simple. He did not wince a minute. He did not hesitate a minute. And this is the moral fiber of this great man who would always say it as it is. Not hurtful. It could not have been hurtful. That was long past, maybe 25, 30 years back. But a matter of fact. I cannot forget that sentence. If I failed you, you must have deserved to fail. And then we paid for the cup of coffee and we walked down. He had really aged by that time and he needed help. He had a walking stick in one hand. I held his hand in the other. He said, Ravi, hold my hand. And we walked out of the canteen and I said, sir, we need to have a photograph of the two of us. And he said, okay, sure, let's have a photograph. And you have no idea how hard I had to search to locate this photograph. I knew I had it somewhere. I'd seen it a few years back. So finally I found it. And you can see this 80-year-old man. And his hand is held by a 60-year-old student. When was the last time you saw something like this anywhere? And of course, in the GS Medical College. So I was so excited by this whole morning meet. You can see that it is November, there's mist in the background, the shadows are towards us, it's early morning. And I wrote up the whole episode of what happened in my school group, the school Google group, that same evening. And here is proof. 1 second. So on that 17th November, the month I retired from KEM, this is what I said. From Sir with love, a cup of coffee, hold my hand and a hug. So what happened then was that we finished all the photograph and I walked him to the cab. He lives in Kemp's Corner. And as I was about to open the door of the cab for him, he opened his bag. Did you see that cloth bag? Because it's registered trademark. He has it slung like that. I've been seeing it for a long time. He used a carry bag. Now he has a cloth bag. He opened that bag and he gave this book to me. And he said something really, really moving. He said, Ravi, this has been my personal copy for many, many years. I treasure it. But then I now have a photocopy of this book because this book is no longer available. But this book is now passing to you and your worthy hands. I could have cried. Your worthy hand. And then he said, like me, when you are done with it, pass it on to more worthy hand. So he gave this book, and in full view of people walking on the footpath outside CVTC, he and I hugged each other. Something that I can never forget. So S.D. Bhandarkar has been in many ways responsible for my introduction to this book, the all-time great book of Sir William Osler called Equanimitas. What this is about, hopefully you will see towards the course of that lecture. Now, these three people, therefore, form a part of the history of Ravi Ramakantan, Sir William Osler. I have said it in great detail because I was recounting this to Dr. Sunil Pradya some time back, and he said, Ravi, this is something that has to be documented because this is a part of GS history. Obviously, he meant write it up, and I'm very, very lazy. So I took this opportunity to record it for posterity. Hopefully, it will be in a hard disk somewhere. For me, it is not personally important. All that I said about my warmth, my almost crying is not important. What is important is that this is the tradition of GS, and that's why I tell people, You may get admission anywhere in India, but if you have an opportunity, come to GS Medical College, because there are traditions that you will not see in many other places. So this happened therefore, and then this is what I told you from Sir with Law, and I have the whole transcript from 2010, but I won't bore you with that. I'll go now. This is what I concluded. At the end of this description in this Google group of my school, we are still in touch. 50, 60 years after leaving school, we will meet again on the 27th of this month in a reunion at the school. I'm saying this because we are extremely open with each other, and this is what I said. I mean, this is all example. When this came out as a road, that in a medical school like ours, we learn a lot more than medicine. There was a time when I used to be teaching undergraduates radiology, and I would always, of course, talk about a lot of this and that. I used to have a medical humanities exercise with radiology. So a case, I'd say what this is all about. Anyway, that's a different story altogether. And I asked several batches of students, 20, 25 of them. This was between 2008 and 2010. And I could see that they were very smart kids. I said, tell me honestly, what is it in medicine that you can't learn by yourself? But you don't need those lectures that we have in the lecture theaters. And I told them this is a safe space. That proved in radiology. Nobody will know who has said what. So be honest and tell me, what is it in medicine that you can't learn by yourself? And most of them said, except biostatistics, we can learn most of it on ourselves, the theory part of it. We don't need those PowerPoint presentations in lecture halls. So what they really needed was what was going on in the hospital side. Now I'm saying this as a matter of fact. I'm not saying that I agree with that, but this is what they said. So what we need to be doing and what we are doing through some teachers about opening the horizon beyond the four walls of the curriculum is so important for people to get enthralled by the history of medicine and the people who have made it happen. So this is part two, the real talk start so far. As I said, I wanted to say the first part because it had to be recorded, and Dr. Sunil Pandya agreed, or in fact, he was the one who motivated me to document this in great detail. Now, as the part two starts, now you can't sit back and watch me talk or go and do some WhatsApp at the same time, because I'm going to be asking you questions. And you have to write the answer for yourself. Along the course of this talk, I'll probably be answering them, and you can check out how right you have been. It's supposed to be fun. It's not an exam. These are not difficult questions. But this will engage you in some thinking as we go through this lecture, which will be for the 15 or 20 minutes. So, because most of the bachus are not in paper and pencil, you can keep your cell phones, you can write a notepad, you can do what you want on your digital device, but please document. When there is a question mark on the slide, I'll tell you what the question is. Please document for yourself. This is supposed to be fun. I will not check. Nobody will know. You will just check for yourself whether you are right or not. And not all of them have categorical answers. It's not a plus b whole square equal to a square, whatever. There can be a matter of opinion in some of them. Okay, there we go. Where in a hospital or college will you find this plaque? This plaque has changed places. So if you are in different generations, you may be able to write something, but those of you who are Bachu Log now, right now, today, where will you find this? Now, this is supposed to be Sir William Osler's most popular quote. And let me tell you my own story about this. So I've been seeing this for a long time. I think it was outside somewhere in the anatomy department. Dopa can correct me if I'm wrong. And then it went somewhere. And finally, it came outside this place where you're supposed to answer for yourself. Look at how stupid I am, right? So I went through this and I said, uncharted sea. And I said, uncharted sea. And to myself, I used to think for decades that uncharted is something to be chartering planes and something like that, till I realized, I don't know when or how, that uncharted meant things that have been not marked with lines on maps. And then the whole thing falls into place for me that books are important, but patients are more important. You learn from patients. And that has been the goalpost of Sir William Osler's life, like no one before him had done. And we'll see that as we go along, and we'll see how it happened. This is true even today, and I am very, very sorry I have to say this, because I think I've said it last time. I'm told by faculty that students don't come to the ward. You're making a big mistake. CEDs will happen, you will fail some CEDs, you'll pass some CEDs. But if you miss the opportunity for learning on patients, you're lost it. You're not a physician. You are a computer. You are artificial or natural intelligence, putting garbage in and getting garbage out. Medicine is learned here, like he says, by looking at patients. So this is the first fact about Sir William Osler, to put this in perspective. So this happened, what, 150 years ago, whatever, long ago, long ago, before antibiotics, before perhaps stethoscope, but there were patients at that time. And this was the period we are talking about. And Sir William Osler was a Canadian, not, well, in the literal sense, not North American, but not an American US national, but a Canadian. And this is the name of the town or the village, you want to call it. He was born. It's called Bond Head. Look at this road. There's no question that these roads have been built by the Bombay Municipal Corporation in 1849. This is the state of the small town he was born in. It had a school enough for William Osler to go to. So this is Bond Head. When William Osler, no, this is 18 something. It's the number is there. I can't see it on the monitor now. It's in the late 1800s. And then we have Bond Head today. Each house is 1.8 million US dollars. That's all. Things have changed now. I'm just putting this for the fact that I saw this and was fascinated by the difference between the two. Okay, now this is William Osler's family, a big family. There are 4 brothers and 5 sisters. There is a mother and there is a grandmother. You see the question mark on the top left of your screen. Look at this photograph and note down, not in your mind, but in your text or whatever, which of these, but choose. So you have 4 boys. Which of these is Willie? He used to be called as Willie by his mother, Williams. So William Osler. Which of these is Sir William Osler? Okay, have a good look. You cannot toss a coin. There are 4 virtues, 4 boys. A large family. His father is not here, and maybe I have a reason why the father is not in this particular picture. Now, I begin to call him as Willie Osler because I read so much in the last few weeks about him. I sort of know his horoscope. But it's comfortable for me to call him Willie Osler, William Osler, Sir William Osler. So, there's something strange about history. History is what somebody writes about. So, like I told you, the history of my coming in contact with William Osler, that's my version, the real version, hopefully, because I already documented it on the same day. But when it goes out, it will get diluted, things will change. Do you know that nobody knows for sure how old Bhagavad Gita is? If you look at Google, it will tell you 200 BC. You look at Vedic scholars, they will tell you it is 600 BC. So all history is through the eyes of people who think they know. Okay, now this is the general consensus of what William Osler was as a kid. And all of these slides, boring as they may sound, make William Osler, Sir William Osler, the father of modern medicine. You see the relationship between what he was as a kid, what he was as a son, what he was as a school student, as an MD student, and what he became as Sir William Osler. The point is that we are what we are, the way we grow up, the people who bring us up, and the teachers who teach us. And I keep saying this last time, it's what your teachers are. We talk about that, right? It's what medical students are, is about what the teachers are. So he was outgoing. I didn't find many people saying he was outgoing. Athletic, yeah. He would play rugby, and once he broke his tibia, he had osteomyelitis. And there is a beautiful sentence there which says, that healed with rest. Osteomyelitis healed with rest. No antibiotic. He was not great at his studies, and many people along the line, so I read many places, they say he was an average student. But everyone has said that he was an extremely naughty student in school. In all schools that he went to multiple schools for reasons that you will see. And he was also a practical joker, even in school, do outrageous things and with consequences. I'm talking about the same Dr. William Osler, outrageously naughty in school. The important thing about him is the family's religious background. This is important. So listen to this carefully. Both his father and mother were in the ministry. Some of us may not know what ministry is all about. That means they would preach the truth, the gospel to people. And seeing their work, William Osler, the young Willie, also wanted to go into ministry, though his parents dissuaded from doing so. But when he grew up in an atmosphere of religious righteousness. He heard his parents talk about the right thing to do, and you'll see some examples of that. So he had that background, and I'm sure for many of you, the way you grew up at home and your school, the teachers that you influenced you when you were 6, 7, and 8, all of that is important. Now, we go on to his school. This is again in Bondhead, a small school, which was an elementary school. I suppose that would mean up to 8th standard. But that didn't matter. I told you that William Osler was a huge nutcracker balak, and the things that he did in school are quite simply unbelievable. One time, he and his friends went to school when there was vacation time, broke the lock of a classroom, removed all the benches, and filled the classroom with geese. Now here is a simulated picture or what happened. This is what they did. Now these are big geese, they are small ones, and they filled the whole classroom with geese and locked the door. Next morning, when whoever opened the door, all the geese flew out, and eventually William Osler and his gang had the reputation. They were seriously reprimanded for what they did. Now, this is the first documented history of naughtiness of Sir William Osler. This carried on all his life, and he is called a practical punkster, even when he became a senior medical doctor. So this is number one. What happened? And then one time, he and his friends, through the keyhole of the matron's office, I think, started using foul language. Again, they were caught. And this time, they were banished from school. Not only that, for 2 days, these bachus spent time in a prison. That bad. Can you imagine? We have heard probably of your classmates in school suspended, some of them rusticated, some of them expelled, but not school kids in prison. You're talking of 1800. And when this happened, look at this. This is again 1800. Look at the person who was written, Elaine Osler, William Osler's mother. This is the original transcript. The amount of resources about Osler, the original ones that are available in various collections throughout the world, is quite mind-boggling. So you will have trouble reading it. I'm surprised. Why did she not write it with hand? And this was to William Osler when he was just coming out of prison. Why did she not write by hand? Were there typewriters at that time? This is an authentic document. Anyway, so I made it simpler for you. This is what she wrote. And I want you to look at the bold italics that she wrote. You can easily see that this has direct relationship to the religious background, to the Bible, and I want you to particularly note the word, the golden rule. For some of you may already be knowing that in our Shastras, in our Vedas, this is what is really called as Dharma. So when you lead a path of Dharma, that means you do to others what you would want them to do to you, and you will not do to others what you will not do to them. And this so-called golden rule, and this one particular dome that Sir William Osler received as he was coming out of prison, changed the course of his life, because he had not wanted to do ministry. And he pleaded with his mother, please let me go to ministry again. Now, this whole letter, if you read carefully, puts the life of this great man into the life of a small child, a loving mother and loving sisters. Strange, there is no mention of brothers, but this is such a heartwarming message from his mother. It must have been for this kid who was just coming out of prison, and by all accounts, it changed who he was forever. So, all his naughtiness and his back and forth, I want to do ministry, I don't want to do ministry, took William Osler through multiple schools. There is a story there. It's not common. It was not common even then. He went, I don't know how many of you know grammar school. Grammar school is school where people have a pre-test, a test before you come into school. And depending upon how much you know, you go into that particular level of class or whatever. So he went through multiple schools and he got expelled from 2 of them. And when he was about to go into ministry, and this is also very important, he came across, I think it was in the Trinity College School, he came across a teacher who took a liking to young Willie and took him out of the classroom from lectures on history from arts, from mathematics, and introduce him to nature. So they would they would have long walks where he would talk to him about stars, astronomy, our place in the world. He would pick up a drop of dirty water from a pond, put it below the microscope, and then Osler himself mentioned that seeing those microbes moving around in the dirty pool of water and knowing that a little bit of that some of them could cause disease, he said, that changed my mind completely. I decided that I wanted to be a physician. Now, if you see his life story, you will be appalled. You're not appalled. You will be so surprised that he said, I want to be a doctor. So he finished his Trinity College and he walked into medical school. So all this is about what I told you about his father teacher, let's call him that, and I forget the name. And then he went into medical school. He first joined Toronto Medical School. He just walked in. No NEET exam, no preparatory classes, no tuitions, no mugging, no sleepless nights, no competition. He just walked into the Toronto Medical School. He learned a lot of medicine there. And then he soon realized that there is not enough patient material, and he switched to a larger hospital in McGill University, all in Canada. And in 1872, at the age of what, 79, 24 or something, he became a fully qualified physician. And then his life is again one of somebody who has wheels on his life. He went all over the world. He went to the United Kingdom, he went to what he calls continent, which is essentially Germany, and that had some influence on how he would become a teacher of medicine. He was someone who had a wide span. And that is quite simply amazing. I know it's not possible for us. So on one hand, he was what we call an internal medicine person, but he did autopsies himself. It is reported that he did about 1,000 autopsies. He used a microscope himself. He looked at blood under the microscope. He looked for organisms under the microscope. He taught medical students. He ran departments. So he did a full expanse of things. And that is what made him father of modern medicine. Is that enough to make somebody a father of modern medicine? Just looking at things? Perhaps not. We'll see something more in the coming slide. So he did postpartums, and of course he did physiology and pathology when he was in the UK and in the continent. So as a qualified MD, unlike us, he had the richness of looking at multiple things before he settled down to a career in internal medicine. So this is an important part of his life, of being what he became in life after about a decade or so. Now, look at this. This is Sir William Osler. And this is, I think, the photograph that Rahul has got on the announcement. What do you notice? Is there a question mark? No, I'm putting a question mark. What is the strange thing or the overwhelming thing that you notice in this? Obviously, he is writing a book, a chapter, a lecture. He wrote extensively, he talked extensively. Most of it is documented. What do you notice about this here? If you are from KM, you will notice the register. And registers means records. I refer to you about the records in the Department of Neurosurgery and Endocrinology, perhaps other departments in KM, but Sir William Osler maintained with his own hands records of all that he saw, all that he did, which eventually helped him write books and become the father of modern medicine. there is a lesson to all of us in this, including me, and especially young students who might be listening to you or listening to me. Keep records. Keep records of everything. If you think that is recordable, keep a record of patients that you see, diseases that you see, postmortems that you attend, whatever. Whether you are a first year undergraduate student or a final year MD or MS student, keep records. So those records are not important, may not be important by themselves, but that have made you into a record keeper. And you realize as you grow up that without records, there can be no research. All of William Osler's legacy is about his records. He kept records for everything. And there is a slide later on where you will see that he had a record for something really, really strange. So when you have records like him and a fertile mind, which can span multiple disciplines, it's not surprising that he wrote a very, very comprehensive book for the first time in the English-speaking world. And that book, this is this is the bed of my son when he appeared for the NEET exam. And Dr. M.L.K. used to say that what we do now is garbage in, garbage out. He used to call it G-Go. And this is what they do, what you people did. You have these small books, you recite your MCQs. You have come from that tradition. To keep records and do original research may not be your cup of tea, but you guys are all smart, much smarter than what we were, because you come from the NEET battlefield. So if you can do that, and if you apply your mind to what Sir William Osler did, you can bring out good quality work on patients who come to us. I keep saying it. Indian patients are not 6 feet tall. They don't have blue eyes or blonde hair. Our diseases are different. Our treatments have to be different. Our learnings have to be different. We cannot blindly follow Boyd's pathology or Hutchinson's method. For our patients, our diseases are different. 20 kilometers apart. The pathologies that I see at the Kokila Hospital and the ones that I used to see at KM are so very different. So the opportunities for research under our conditions are mature out there. 1,800 official beds, 2,500 unofficial beds. Patients who treat them, even medical students, as gods. Respectfully examine them, learn from them, because that opportunity will never ever come again. I know I'm preaching, but that is the learning from Sir William Osler's life, of learning by the bedside. And I'll come to that in a minute or so. Now this is interesting. So he gained popularity as one of the world's foremost physicians because he had learned by himself the hard way. Seeing patients, seeing their blood, seeing their other fluids, and off and on doing their own postmortems himself. When you learn like that, you're going to be a master. And to boot it all, he kept records. And then he wrote this book. That book shot him into fame. And he was invited by JHU, but that we'll see in a minute, to head the Department of Medicine in Baltimore. They thought that Sir William Osler was the right choice, even from outside the United States of America, to head the department at JHU. Now, what's JHU? Let's see. I think it's in the next slide. It's found. Okay, the question now here is which is the right one? And you have to learn. If there's one thing you learn from this lecture, to say JHU correctly. So there are multiple options. And these are options that I have taken out, some of it from the top of my head, some of it from the JHU website. They said that even some have even called that John Hopkins University. which of these is the correct one. And Dr. Supe, Dr. Avinash Supe, if you are listening to me now, yesterday's talk, last week's talk, I caught you napping. You said the full form wrongly. I know you're busy seeing patients, but this is now on the recording that you said the full form wrongly. It's a big deal. The big deal is getting things right, getting details right. So which one of these is the correct answer? So write it for yourself, and then the fun starts. Well, okay. Now see this. This is completely official. If you are a radiologist, you'll know that there is something wrong. So this is the Johns Hopkins University. And then one day later, it becomes the Johns Hopkins University. So this is the correct full form. The Johns Hopkins University. It's not any of those other forms. There is no apostrophe, there is no single John. It's John's because it's the name of the person. I'll come down to the rule later. Now, this is an official photograph from the university. This is an official photograph from the university. In 2010, for the first time, they said that this is getting too much. People call us all sorts of things. There is an apostrophe. They call us Hopkins. So we are going to accept that we are changing the name of our university from Johns Hopkins University to John Hopkins University. And this was an April Fool joke in 2010, officially by the university. It was repeated in 2017 or so. Now, I'm spending some time on Johns Hopkins because Johns Hopkins is what made William Osler what he eventually became in life. And William Osler made Johns Hopkins medicine what it became and what it is now. Now, Johns Hopkins, if you look at the history carefully, has a history similar to our alma mater. Now, Johns Hopkins was a merchant in Baltimore, Maryland, a grain merchant. He did his job so well that he went into big riches and he took over a share in something Baltimore Railways. And when he died, he left $7 million US, whenever it was in the 1800s, for creation of a medical school, for creation of a nursing school, and creation of a university, so that the poor in the interiors of Baltimore, Maryland could benefit from free treatment. Does that not sound like Gurdana Sundara? The amounts were huge. And he was particularly bothered at that time by the specter of slavery. So there are some stories about what he did. And I think he wanted to get rid of that guilt. And he said that this university, this hospital, will be run in such a way that the poorest of the poor from the interiors of Baltimore, which means the slums, which means the blacks or the Negroes, could benefit from that. So it was a large teaching hospital. And Sir William Osler was one of the first, or in fact, the first of four people who joined that hospital, including Hatchet from surgery. And there are two other big names in OBGY or whatever it is. So he went into the Johns Hopkins University and he brought an important revolution in the way medical students are taught. Now, but you look, close your eyes. Think. You finish pharmacology, pathology, whatever you do now in the second year, and you are on the verge of going to the hospital to learn from war room. And then you are told that tradition is no longer available because patients have said, for whatever reason, there is no hospital, for whatever reason, that you cannot learn by the bedside, you will learn in the college rooms, college halls. That was the case in the United States of America large pieces of large countries around the world, except perhaps in Europe, that students did not learn by the side of the patient. William Osler changed all that at JHU. He said that I will take up this position only if students can learn by the bedside. And in his own words, he said, I transported the classroom from the lecture halls to the bedside of the patient. This was, in those days, huge revolution in the way medical education was imparted. If you ask me, I'll tell you something at the end of this lecture in about 10-15 minutes. Okay, so what he did was this. I'm showing you this particular slide to illustrate the width of the knowledge of this man. How he could, in those days, write a thick volume of book on the principle and practice of medicine, covering so many various diseases like you have here. Two completely unrelated subjects, but he has got lecture notes on that. Again, I repeat, it's possible only because you study them in great depth. So if you have an opportunity, you've seen a patient in the ward, you've seen a patient in the OPD gets admitted in the ward, and then his post-mortem is done. Do not ever miss that opportunity. 3 a.m. in the morning, if the post-mortem is being done, I don't know if it's done in the night these days, attend the post-mortem. That 1 day's sleep is not important. If you don't believe me about the value of post-mortem, ask anyone from the Department of Neurosurgery. They have a near 100% record of post-mortems of patients who died. Not just that, they would attend brain-cutting sessions where everything was dissected. That kind of learning, and I have been a part of it for a small period of time, that learning is unbeatable. So that is what this is all about. And these are in multiple papers in his own words. Learning by the bedside, learning in post-mortem, and learning under the microscope, all by one man who went to become the father of modern medicine. Naturally, no one else before him has done something like this anywhere in the world. So these are two examples, and there are many examples of what all he founded or discovered as a physician. So that was about the medical part of it. Now Osler had this phenomenally wide reading and also about the scriptures. He continued to read about the scriptures in Christianity. And then he gave these unending lectures to faculty and medical students at various times. When new students come in, when students leave the hospital after an MD, when faculty, there's some occasions on which he had an opportunity to address faculty. All of that will be available in this book for you to read. By and by, you'll get used to that language of it's oldish English, but not difficult reading. But all his quotations, all his lectures on beyond medicine, and sometimes even in medicine, are on this book. And Dr. Bhandarkar gave me this book in whatever, 2010. He told me this book is no longer available. Now it is not true. You go to Amazon, you'll find all of Osler's book available in the Kindle edition or hardcover. The Kindle editions are inexpensive. So I have this principle and practice of medicine with me in the Kindle edition. I think it cost me a few hundred rupees. So when you feel up to it, when you have some spare money, order these. I mean, I'll tell all faculty, if they are listening to me, you finish your MBBS, order this book on Amazon and read it on Kindle. You have to read because it is full of wisdom. Question, what wisdom? And that's my favorite question. We'll let it go. So he wrote this book. So we have a spectrum of a man who talked beyond medicine and talked about all of medicine. It's not surprising that we celebrate him even today like we celebrate no one else. So this is the book, and I told you this is the same picture of Sir William Osler, register, and he's always writing in longhand. No Google Voice. I use Google Voice even for SMS. My typing skills are really bad. But so he wrote in longhand and without secretarial help. Look at the amount of hard work this man has put in for the benefit of others. And then we come to his greatest contribution to medicine, and that's bedside teaching. Look at this. The first thing that strikes you in the late 1800s, and Dr. Pandya mentioned this, there are no women students here. You will see that all of them are in long aprons and all of them have neckties. The story goes that if some student came to the ward without neckties, forget aprons, you would throw them out. They had to be properly dressed. They had to be on time. You're late by 5 minutes, you leave the ward. So this is the first example in the English-speaking world of bedside teaching, which now happened at the Johns Hopkins University. For a moment, wonder how in the world could medicine have been taught without bedside teaching? And all of you bachulo who bunk wards, and that's what I hear, and I'm saying this, to study for your damned MCQs. I use that word purposely, are missing out on being a good doctor, whatever that means. You cannot do that. It's a big mistake. Whether clinics are taken or not, go to the ward, see patients, be respectful to them, and learn from patients. Follow them up till they go home, or unfortunately, if they go to the postmortem, that learning will be with you for a lifetime. I am saying this so emphatically because I'm really, really pained to learn from your teachers that students don't come to the ward. Emphatically, students don't come to the ward. How can that be? Why would that be? So that was that. So what he did was he always thinking all the time. A naughty boy keeps thinking, how to do musty. What he did was that these rounds are beneficial to these 15, 20 medical students. Let's have a larger gathering of medical students. And he took the rounds from the bedside back to the lecture hall and what he called the grand rounds. So grand rounds are rounds that are held periodically, maybe once a week or whatever, where so-called interesting cases, I told you last time, no interesting cases, so-called interesting cases were discussed in a lecture hall like this. Everyone is attending. You have usually a visiting faculty examine the patient and discuss the clinical finding and give a clinical differential diagnosis. This is how the good old grand rounds was, and we will sometime talk about how grand rounds are today. They're not the same, but they are different. But we have to look at how to make grand rounds grand again. Okay, we'll talk about that at the end of this lecture. So this is a grand round. A thinking man says, let's benefit everyone. Because when you take a patient like this, of course, there are permissions required. There are other issues involved. You are increasing collective wisdom and you are getting collective input. Somebody in the hall, a medical student, may raise his hand and say, why can't it be this? Everyone learns. And it gives an opportunity for healthy dialogue between the teacher and the student. We need to have that spirit. The current culture is students don't open their mouth in front of their teacher. I don't know whether you don't know to open your mouths, you're afraid of opening your mouth, you're afraid of making mistakes. And I beat my head when I take lectures with postgraduates in radiology. What do you think? No one says it. It's not possible that you are not thinking. I'm taking this opportunity because William Osler is all about education. That part, when he wrote about the book, is different. The part like this is all about education, and so much of his economitas and his addresses to medical students is about education. Therefore, I hope many of you will read that book. I told you some time back that he was obsessive about record keeping. So when you have a grand rounds like this, by the way, it's like Johns Hopkins. It is not grand round. It's always in plural. Grand rounds. Don't ask me why. I don't know. G capital, R capital. Don't ask me why. I don't know. So when you write grand round, it's wrong. It's grand round. Like I take rounds in the wall. It's not round in the wall. Anyway, so he was so meticulous with his attendance. He could just have taken an attendance, right? He would take an attendance and record it in a journal, and then he will wonder whose signature is this? This is all recorded. He will even wonder if somebody has forged his signature or not. Recording attendance was compulsory in William Osler's time. Okay, so this is about the grand rounds. We are coming to the last 5 minutes of the talk, and we will philosophize a little bit in the words of Sir William Osler himself, because his life was not just about hardcore medicine, but more about the philosophy of being a physician. And these are something that I want you to read, perhaps. This is all from the internet, it's all available. But the first one is something that he is obsessed with. He talks about the present moment all the time. You know, the present moment in Buddhism, they say, live in the present moment. The past is gone, forget it. The future is uncertain, don't think about it. Live in the present moment. He talks about that all the time. And he says this, is to do a day's work well and not to bother about something that happened tomorrow. There's another beautiful saying by him, if I can use the word, is that the best preparation for tomorrow is to do today's work superbly well. What I would like a hospital or college to do is to give all medical students complimentary a small spiral notebook. That notebook will be called My Notes. You have GSMC emblem on it, and then at the back of it, I have William Osler's quote. The best preparation for tomorrow is to do today's work superbly well. That will keep reminding you that you have to be on the ball all the time or you will lose the match. It's easily possible to fund it from the Gosumai Alumni Association or wherever you can find funders for this beautiful little diary, which I hope students will preserve. You write your notes on that, small things about who gave you bhakti, who gave you repeat terms, whatever you want to write. But that will be a beautiful multicolor cover for my notes. So this is what he said. I will do my work well every day. Now, the second one is the golden rule. Imagine this old man was told this by his mother in a letter as he was coming out of the prison, and she talked about the golden rule. And the golden rule was the dharma of Hindu culture. And I know it. I've seen about it, I've read extensively, and I know that when we say dharma, we mean this thing. Do not do something to others that you do not want them to do to you. And perhaps do to others what you want them to do to you. So this was one second ideal of Sir William Osler. And the third one is surprisingly is about equanimity. He talks about equanimity at multiple instances. I suppose as a physician, you need to be equanimous. You see good days, you see bad days, you save patients, you lose patients. You have in our country students falling, patients, relatives falling at your feet, and sometimes shouting at the top of their voice. Therefore, you need to be equanimous to take this part of your life reasonably well. And there are those moments in real life outside the hospital, outside of you as a doctor, that you need to be equanimous about. So he talks about equanimity a lot. And then, if you have read the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about this to Arjuna in multiple places, and he calls it samatva. Samatva, it's a simple Sanskrit word. Now, if you get the impression that I'm a great reader of scriptures, no, no, no. I listen to it a little bit of here and there, and I make a big deal of it. But the fact is that both these qualities, especially equanimity, if it's a big word in the Bhagavad Gita, it must be important. And he has said that, and it's an amazing coincidence I cannot let go of. Now, I'm going to show you, as we end this lecture, a few quotations from Sir William Osler. Now, this man, in his various addresses to medical teachers, faculty, wherever, in the course of his lecture, has said some phenomenal things which you can look up the internet and look for quotations by Sir William Osler, and you will see reams of them. Many of them are repeated, but the more you see, the more you will see different fields. Now, this is one of my all-time great favorites. If you are a medical teacher, this should be your watchword. Let's see. I'm going to read it for you. I have a confession to make. That word gentleman, I think I showed it last time, is important because there are no lady students. I have a confession to make. Half of what we have taught you is in error. And furthermore, this is a very beautiful word. We don't use it often. We don't say furthermore. We say moreover. The more I read about our oldish English, I like this word, and you'll see me using it more and more in my normal day-to-day English. So half of what we have taught you is in error. Furthermore, fill in the blanks. No? Okay, I will show. Furthermore, we cannot tell you which half it is. This is full popper. So, sir, full popper. A great man like William Osler confessing this to medical students. And you must have heard, the beginning of all learning is knowing what you don't know. And there is no learning if you believe that you don't know things. So it's in a different way. But the forthrightness of this man comes through this. And this one is etched on a big frame in the teaching room at the Kokilaben Hospital. And I hope this will find its place somewhere low park, find its way somewhere in the college halls of the GS Medical College. It's so beautiful that if you learn this, if you see this from your teachers, you are sure that, okay, it's fine for the teachers make mistakes. It's fine for me to make mistakes. We have something called reverse meetings in radiology education. Normally in a radiology education, cases are shown. I ask the bachus, what do you think, etc., etc. In a reverse meeting, they show me cases and I'm supposed to diagnose. That's the spirit of the meeting. Bachus are gone case. They are scared to ask questions to Ravi Ramakantan. They'll ask some simple question. Is this an X-ray or is this a CT scan? So the spirit of equality between teacher and student has to be cultivated by us. There is no insecurity in that. You know that you don't know. Let the students also know that you don't know. There is no shame in that. If Osler can say that, we can accept it as a way of life. So we have to promote, as Osler says, open dialogue between students and teachers so that we learn from them and they learn from us. So these are some other quotes. And I think the first one is extremely important. Listen to the patient. He is telling you the diagnosis. Do not just see the disease the patient has, but also the patient who has the disease. We seriously believe that diseases are different in different patients, like faces are different, like hands are different, and the outside is different, the inside is different, therefore the same disease affects different patients differently. And this comes from close observation, even at postmortem. And then the best preparation for tomorrow is to do today's work superbly well. The first step in education, oh no, I don't know what this is, I forget, sorry. The value of experience is not how vast it is or how wisely it is learned, how large it is or how wise it is learned. And then he talks about the variability of the law of life, just as human beings are different, diseases are different, and no one thing will treat all patients who have the same disease. So this is 5 or 6 of hundreds of such quotations. You will form your own favorites, and maybe after a month, I want some bachus to send me by email, Ravi Ramakantan @gmail.com, one of your most favorite quotations. I hope I'll get at least one email. I do this all the time. I tell Bachu Log or anybody to send me email. No one sends. It doesn't matter. But I have done my part of it. Hopefully, one of you, besides Rahul, will send me an email with your most favorite quotation of Sir William Osler. Now, this is where the Oslers are buried. This is what we'll commonly call as the tombstone. And what is written on the tombstone is called epitaph. And then I asked you at the beginning, what do you think Sir William Osler should be known most part? He has many syndromes, he has written his books, he has got his sayings, so on and so forth. We don't have to think about it. Sir William Osler himself said this. Okay. Unless you're a very slow reader, you must have read that he taught medical students by the bedside. He considers it as his greatest contribution in his career to medicine, taught by the bedside. But you look again, the learning you will have from patients is something unrivaled, completely unrivaled. Do not miss an opportunity for the sake of competitive exams. Okay. Now I come to something nuts and bolts. I talked about ourselves so much, and we have, as the centenary approaches, get serious about what we can do about Oslerism in GS Medical College, our alma mater. I have listed all of them here. None of them requires great effort. It's always possible. Each of them is easy. All that you need is some faculty, a couple of faculty to take interest in each of this and conduct it. And I want Bachu Log to volunteer to say, let Lokapameta be the one-point contact. Then we have the academic dean who can look after the conduct of these. I'll explain what these are about. Monthly grand rounds. In the traditional grand round, a patient is got into the lecture hall. I'm repeating myself. We get a faculty from either the hospital who has not seen the patient or from outside the hospital. So we are Sahan Nair, KEM, JJ, we got, and he examines the patient in the lecture hall and then talks about how he comes at differential diagnosis. I understand you cannot have a patient just like that in the MLD, but you can do it via Zoom, you can do it via anything. But the idea is students see, other faculty see, a senior faculty actually examining the patient, take history, examine findings, come to a diagnosis, and then say what are the lab things that have to be done. So this is the expansion of a grand round, eminently possible. With the type of patient workload that we have, you have to nominate just one day of a month, first Monday of a month. This will be grand rounds. Grand rounds also take different forms these days. They not necessarily have patients. You can invite speakers to talk about some topics. You can get our own faculty to talk about the work that they do, the so-called interesting cases they have, the great surgery they did, or even about complications that they have. So Grand Round is a meeting place for academic exchange of all that happens in a particular part of the hospital. I hope we will start it. I hope the academic dean will push faculty to start the grand rounds in quite earnest. Now, a CPC is a clinical pathological conference. We used to have it some time back. I hope the pathologists will, I already talked to Daksha about this, the pathologists will take the lead and list cases for CPC. So these cases are very, very interesting clinically, where you have another faculty from somewhere who has not seen the patient come to the, when he is given all the investigation, all reports, all clinical finding. So he sits in his room or office or wherever, goes through all the records. He doesn't see the patient yet, and does all the reading that he wants, comes to the lecture hall on the CPC day and discusses in detail. These are the clinical findings. These are the lab reports. Therefore, I think the most likely diagnosis is this. This is an expert in the field who has not seen the patient, who is not from GS Medical College. Again, it's like grand rounds. Without patients, you see how great analysis of the data can often give you a correct diagnosis. Now, junior grand rounds. This is fun. Just like oldie goldies do monthly grand rounds, I want residents and medical students to have their own grand rounds once in 3 months or 4 months. And there is something called Osler evenings. I don't know why it is called. This will be fun. What happens in Osler evenings, it doesn't happen in evenings. One of usually a senior faculty from the hospital, I'm sorry, from the college, is interviewed by a junior medical student in front of everybody. How I got to be where I am today. So you bear your story. This is what I was, this is how I was born, this is how my interests were, this is how I went to college, therefore I became a doctor, therefore I became whatever I became, and this is what I enjoyed, this is what. So the story of life of a particular senior faculty as is interviewed by a junior medical student. So this again puts some sort of, breaks some sort of barriers between students and faculty. And the most important thing, 12th of July, Osler's birthday, should be appropriately celebrated every year. Lopa does it all the time. You can have medical humanities competition. You can do what you want. But 12th July cannot go by as one other 12th July because it's William Osler's birthday. And this has been my dream, the last one. Somehow it's not happening. I wanted it in memory of Dr. C.V. Patel, who according to me is the best teacher that I had by the bedside. And teaching by the bedside is something that is an art. And there is some way we should find out every year who is the most effective bedside teacher. I said effective because if you use the word the best medical teacher, all sorts of eyebrows are raised. But I know it is practically difficult, but not impossible. And we can have a prize for this person. We can do what you want, but bedside teaching has to be honored with a memento and a prize, because, as I've said, that is all that matters. With that, I come to the end of my talk, but leave you with this thought that therefore, let's have new beginnings. Thank you. Good night. Rahul, am I done?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm sure there are no questions. What questions will there be? Supesh sir is laughing. Look at him. He's talking on the phone.
We do have some comments.
No, that Maria was. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So we do have a comment from Dr. Sunil Pandya, sir, who's added that the plaque with Osler's quote on books in Uncharted was installed there at the instance of Dr. Manu Kothari and Dr. Lopa Mehta, ma'am.
I know that's an old story. I mean, all that you see in KEM like this is MLK and Lopa Mehta. I mean, it's so amazing. but I've been so lucky, like I told you last time, to be so close to him in many, many ways. There are personal stories that I can't narrate, but it's quite simply amazing that I've been so lucky.
We also have one more comment by Dr. Pandya sir, who said that the suggestions regarding how GSMC can remember, honor, and continue to gain inspiration from Osler are very well made, and it is up to our faculty to take these to heart and implement them. We also have a comment from Dr. Rajesh Parikh sir, who said this is an excellent talk, and that Drs. Manu Kothari and Lopa Mehta ma'am frequently spoke of Equanimitas and advised all medical students to read it. And we also have a comment from Dr. Nana Sahib Chaudhary sir, who has said that he had the honor to give grand rounds at Johns Hopkins and his experience.
Johns Hopkins. I will kill you, Rahul.
He is reading the comment verbatim.
No.
On hydrated disease. So there's a question here for you from Rukaya, who says, why was Osler's father not in the picture and mentioned in the letter, which is
no? I did heavy R&D. You know what is R&D? Research and development. All that I found was that one letter which Osler's mother had written to Osler when he was coming out of prison. Papa is busy working hard in the garden. That's the only reference I found. The other thing that I learned was that one of Osler's brothers became a very famous lawyer, and the other was a famous businessman, but otherwise there is no reference. So I'm not giving up. I will search a little bit about what happened with his father, maybe a sister, other brothers, so on and so forth. I mean, you get addicted when you do so much R&D on a particular person who you admire. At Kokila Ben, they call me Junior William Osler only, because I keep quoting William Osler in the grand rounds all the time. They call me grand rounds, Ravi, William Osler, Ravi, all sorts of things. And they have fun at night. I don't mind. Yeah.
There's also Dr. Damania has thanked you very much for the lecture, and Dr. Hemant Deshmukh sir has said that it was always a pleasure to listen to you. Dr. Manish Shirsat sir has said it was a great talk and has thanked you. Rupaya has added that she is mesmerized by Osler. Dr. Sunil Pandya sir has said that the Osler library at McGill will help you in your researches, sir.
Yeah. There are so many Osler's mementos all over the place. And don't look up Osler on Wikipedia. Okay, there is a second search result that's about famous people in NLM's archives. So read that. Don't read about Wikipedia. Wikipedia is all rubbish. Or Wikipedia. Sorry.
Wait. Yeah. So I think we'll.
That's fine. Yeah.
We will convene next week. We have a lecture by Dr. Bhavin Jankaria on the history of history taking, that is to say, on the history of clinical medicine through the ages. So I shall see you all at 6 p.m. on Friday the 19th. Saturday the 19th.
Okay.
Good night.
Thank you, Kit.